Hey guys, welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to be doing something very different from what I usually do, which is speak about a certain topic that I find interesting. But for this particular video, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking at this interview that went very viral. And basically, it is Sara Gonzalez interviewing Lindsay Hill, and Lindsay is a person who accused baseball player Trevor Bauer of assault. So, and she was going through the whole trial, wanting to make more money. So I just want to look at this interview really quickly and give you my feedback. Just kind of like analyzing some of their behavior, the things that she's saying. So, yeah, let's get started.
Yesterday, we discussed the conclusion of former Major League Baseball player Trevor Bauer's lawsuit stemming from an alleged sexual assault and Bauer's recent video in which he released his side of the story with receipts. Joining me now to discuss that is Bauer's accuser herself, Lindsay Hill. Lindsay, I mentioned Bauer's video in which he provided some receipts that I'm going to be honest with you, make you look like a clout chaser, or I know some people are calling you a cleat chaser because admittedly you were chasing after several high-profile, wealthy baseball players. Trevor says everything was completely consensual. He also released these text messages that came out in court indicating that you had planned the whole thing out. So I want to read some of these texts from you to a friend between the two of you before you met Trevor, this one. Next victim, star pitcher for the Dodgers. Okay. Victim is an interesting choice of words. I'm going to allow you a chance to explain.
Yeah, no, I do think like using the word victim is a very interesting choice of words because no one who's innocent talks like that. So, you can argue that it's a joke, but is it really a joke, especially when it reaches this level? Let's continue. Let's see what she has to say.
But after you agreed to meet, you asked your friend what you should steal. Your friend answered his money. He says another one from you to a friend. I'm going to his house Wednesday. I already have my hooks in. You know how I roll. With a screenshot in which you told him, tryouts don't scare me, Bauer. Pick a day and I am there. Here's some more after you and Trevor met up. Net worth is $51 million, to which your friend responds, bitch, you better secure that bag. Your text.
Okay, so it's just getting worse. Like I can understand that sometimes friends, they have a way where they're joking around with each other and making these edgy jokes. They're not meant to be taken seriously. But just based on the things that they were saying in this text thread, it doesn't really seem like it's a joke. It seems very pre planned and organized. Like a joke is not meant to be that organized. When people are in on a joke, it's just random, it's impulsive, it's not organized. There's no deeper meaning behind it. Obviously, that's not the case here. So,
Need daddy to choke me out, being an absolute whore to try to get in on his $51 million. You say this wasn't a setup. How can you expect anyone to believe that?
That's a great question. I really appreciate you having me on to even have this conversation. Obviously, there's a lot going on around this, so I really appreciate people who are asking questions about it. And the first thing I want to say is, I think.
okay, just really quickly, I think when people talk like that, the way she's talking doesn't seem very genuine. Like, there's no genuineness to it. What she's trying to do is make herself appear innocent by saying, hey, that's a great question. I always appreciate when people ask questions. Well, yeah, of course you're going to say that. Like, what are you going to say? Why are you accusing me of that? I know this is my text thread, but I'm not guilty. People are misusing it. So, right off the bat, she's trying to manipulate this thing.
Trevor did this intentionally with the text messages and how he framed this video. There's several things in it that are not.
See, this is what I meant. So now all of a sudden, he's framing her as the bad guy, not her framing herself as the bad guy based on the things she wrote. So she's not taking accountability for that. She's saying, oh, he's actually taking a bunch of text messages and presenting them in a way that make me look guilty.
Correct. And I just want to start out by saying, it's so valid for people to question those text messages. But the root of the problem here is that he is presenting this as one conversation, when in reality he had thousands of messages to choose from, took those, made it look sequential, which it was not. There is no combined screenshot of those things going on one after the other. And as I said last night as well, there's no text message that ever exists. Otherwise, he would have, put it out there, combining, anything about a setup through rough sex, finances, all in one. Those were.
Okay, so here's what she's doing. She's trying to rationalize this entire thing, saying, okay, well, there was no setup. It was just a bunch of random jokes that were said in so many different threads. But what he did is he took all of those messages and made it seem like it was a sequential thread. But how does that justify what she is saying? Because she's the one who's accusing him of, a sexual assault. So, in what context would what she's saying be justified? I didn't notice anything that followed up where it was just a joke and it was just a very edgy joke. There's no evidence to prove that. So what she's trying to do right now is do damage control. But it's not working because it's obvious she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's trying to reframe a very obvious interpretation into something that's so far removed from what's actually going on. And Sara is, understandably, she doesn't look convinced. Neither am I, actually.
Picked, and they were not. They were from multiple different conversations, all before we met up. And I think that the video in general doesn't even talk about what actually happened between us two, which is what would have come out during a jury trial. These were all messages that happened before, and then of course the video is so valid as well for people to ask questions about. But
There we go again. It's so valid for you guys to be asking questions. I'm such a good person. You know, anybody who wants to ask questions, I would love to answer those questions according to the way my lawyers want me to answer those questions.
do you think that that video was entirely misleading? He also references the restraining order hearing, which people also have questions about. He says that he was cleared of any wrongdoing, which is actually incorrect. In our civil case, the judge had actually ruled that he had not been cleared of any wrongdoing, and that was a federal court judge.
So I want to get to the domestic violence restraining order hearing as well, but I mean, so you're saying that it's misleading because you're admitting that you did talk about rough sex and wanting rough sex. You did talk about him needing to choke you out. You did talk about stealing his money, but it's misleading because he put them together in the same video as if you had said it in the same conversation when in fact it was separate.
Yeah, this is a really good question. This is a really good question. This is a question that I'm glad Sara is asking, not the stuff that Lindsay is saying. Lindsay is not making any sense at all. She's not making any sense. She's just trying to, again, reinterpret what is an obvious interpretation of the events and make it seem she's trying to make such an exceptional case when her case is not exceptional at all. Like, what are the odds that Trevor is the one who just he went through all of this effort just to make her look bad? He doesn't have to do that. She's making herself look bad as it is. So I'm not convinced, and understandably, Sarah is not. And so this is why she's asking her those questions, because I think she has a feeling that she's not going to be very honest. She hasn't been so far.
Conversations, correct? That's why it's misleading.
Correct, and as well as not showing, the messages that occurred after where it discusses it strictly in the term of, being a baseball wife or something like that.
Or something like that. Okay. I'm just curious if you know like the statistical likelihood of you texting your friend premeditated texts saying you wanted him to choke you out and steal his money, take his money, and him actually choking you out, and those two things not being related.
It's a really, really valid question. And like I said, I think you would need to look through each conversation. Those were
Yeah, she's repeating the same PR line. That's a really good question. I really appreciate you having me on to ask that question. She's trying to appear more agreeable and more approachable than she actually is. This is not a behavior of somebody who is mentally in a good state, because it's too exaggerated. It doesn't seem genuine, and there's no, yeah, like, just based on her facial expressions, there isn't really much to convince me that she is being genuine. I mean, how can she be? She's being accused of something that's very serious, just like she accused Trevor of something that's very serious. Accusing a famous person of sexually assaulting you, and then trying to get some sort of financial compensation from that, that's not something that's uncommon. It's very common that many women today use this technique in order to make quick money. And sadly, the court system is guilty of assisting these women a lot of times in the name of like justice or protecting women and things like that. But unfortunately, women like that, they tend to ruin the reputation and credibility of genuine victims of assault. And so this is the consequence of this sort of behavior.
picked. But like I said last night, completely own the fact that those were overly sarcastic, overly inappropriate to some may seem. And it does give off that impression about clout chaser and totally attention seeking behavior. But I just feel that they have, nothing to do with what actually took place. But it does cause a lot of questions as to why I was, seeking Trevor out. But at the end of the day, there was nothing about a setup with violence and all of this stuff and getting financial gain. It was strictly, a 25 or however old I was at the time, girl trying to get attention from those things and phrasing it in a sarcastic way before we met.
Okay, so I've got a couple other questions on that. So you said in court.
Okay, really quickly. Notice how she uses her age as a justification. This is very common with women who want to appear, you know, like genuine victims. They're trying to play on the heartstrings of society, because society has a very soft spot for women who are younger, like much younger, and then being with a guy who is much older. By the way, Trevor is not that much older than her. He's only like, what, 4 years older than her? So, it's not like he was in his 50s and she was in her early 20s. But she's trying to create that kind of dynamic in people's minds so they can automatically make emotional, impulsive judgments. So she's not giving them data for them to come to the conclusion rationally. She's a manipulator, and it's very obvious. And even if you look at her affect, if you notice, this is maybe like just a minor detail, her upper lip is compressed. This is not somebody who's telling the truth. People who are telling the truth, their lips tend to be less constricted. Um, and you can tell she's mastered this affect to appear under control. But I highly doubt internally she is feeling very comfortable in this interview. And understandably so, because Sara is not being very nice about her questioning. And why should she be?
That he sexually assaulted you on 2 different encounters, and you say the first time that you say he choked you unconscious. Clearly, the insinuation is you didn't like it because now you're calling it an assault. But why did you make the drive back to LA to meet back up with him a second time if this man had just assaulted you by your own account?
I think that's a really good question. How I phrased it
agree.
and how in past.
I really like how Sarah says I agree because she's trying to cut through the BS that Lindsay is trying to present. You know, people don't go back to their abusers. They generally don't. And I know there are people who want to Okay, so there's a tendency in our society to over psychologize everything. And usually this is done by people who don't even have any background in psychology. So what they do is they try to explain it in a way where victims, they are so attached to their manipulator that they have no other choice but to go back. So even if they want to leave, they can't leave. But how does this make any sense in this context? This doesn't seem to be somebody who didn't know what they were doing at all. It seemed like she knew exactly what she was doing, and she had a plan organized in order for her to, as she says in the text messages, secure the bag, which is another way of saying make money. How is she going to make money? By taking his money, accusing him of assault, winning a lawsuit, and then making money. So
That I was so embarrassed by the first encounter that I felt something, deep in me to go and take the power back and to be better and to be what he wanted in a sense. And so I don't know.
what does that even mean? Like, how can you take the power in what way? Psychologically, by allowing yourself to be quote unquote assaulted again? That's how you take back the power? Wouldn't taking back the power mean you stop this behavior altogether? This is not making any sense.
Been a lot of, through all the processes, witness experts on the psychology of what happens when you are assaulted, XYZ. But there was something in me that felt like I needed to make it better in a sense.
Okay.
Make it better in a sense. That's very vague. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She's lying. A person who is not lying would give you specifics, right? She's not answering the question specifically. She's just giving very vague psycho lingo kind of stuff. Oh, if you look at the experts of psychology and the things that they say about assault victims and what does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with your specific situation? How does the experts how does the opinion of all these experts going to justify the text thread that you have, that Sarah is understandably asking you about? We still haven't gotten an answer to that, and I don't think we ever will because she's not interested in the truth. She's interested in clout and money.
But you texted Trevor before you met him, telling him you liked rough sex. Then you texted him after your first sexual encounter with him, which you now call an assault. And according to court records, you told him after that sexual encounter that you had, quote, never been more turned on in your life. That's not really something that someone says when they were just assaulted.
That's a very good question, and I think that's what she's going to say.
I think it's a super valid question. Everything you're asking me is a super valid
I
question.
agree. That's why I'm asking them.
This is the thing. It's so obvious now to the viewers too. And if you look at Lindsay, she's smiling. This is not a smile. This is not a warm smile. This is a smile of somebody who got caught. And maybe this is just me reading too much into this, but from the get-go, like if you look at her facial expression, maybe that's just how her face looks. I'm not really sure, but it doesn't look like somebody who knows what they're talking about. And she seems like she got caught off guard. Or if you compare it to how Sarah looks very relaxed. She, like, she's looking directly into the camera. She doesn't seem like she is unprepared or doesn't know what she's talking about. She did her research. Lindsay didn't. She thought this is going to be her way of trying to get attention, which is ultimately what she's looking for. She's just looking for attention. Um, and Sarah's not buying it. Neither am I.
And I think that I'm not, that's what expert witnesses are for in court in terms of the psychology behind that and responses to abuse and things like that. But like I said, I was just trying to make myself feel better about myself after what had happened the first time. After the first time I left without any markings on my body, my face was fine, I could go to work. And I thought that the second time, would be like the first time minus the things I told him I was not comfortable with.
Yeah, so you mentioned the markings on your body. I want to play a portion of his video in which he plays I would say, interesting video of you in his bed. Watch.
In August of 2021, Lindsay Hill's claims were heard in court.
Okay, so this is Trevor Bauer, the one who was accused of assault. Let's see what he has to say.
And during those legal proceedings, critical information was deliberately and unlawfully concealed from me and my legal team. Information like this video, which was taken by Lindsay Hill herself the morning after she claimed she was brutally attacked, emotionally traumatized, and desperate to get away from me. And now we have the metadata, so there can be no dispute. It was taken mere minutes before she left my house on the morning of May 16th, 2021, without my knowledge or consent, of course. In it, you can see her lying in bed next to me while I'm sleeping, smirking at the camera without a care in the world.
This is very ironic. This is very ironic. All this yapping about her being a victim and, her getting physically assaulted, sexually assaulted by Trevor. But what kind of a victim records themselves in bed with their assaulter and smiles and looks very content and happy? I've never seen that. I wonder which expert witnesses would look at this and say, wow, this is a victim here. This is how victims usually respond. What psychological explanation would make this make any sense in that context? Maybe she knows some experts that I personally am not aware of. I've never, read any research or any data that confirm what she's saying. She's clearly, pulling this out of definitely not the research. She's pulling it out of somewhere else, and you know what I'm talking about.
On her face. I think it paints a pretty clear picture of what actually happened the evening of May 15th and why the video was originally concealed from us.
Lindsay, I think there are a lot of sexual assault survivors who would say you don't look traumatized there and you don't look beaten. And this is allegedly after you say that he brutally attacked you and you had bruises all over your body, you had bruises all over your face. I don't see any bruises there, and I certainly don't see a woman who's just been traumatized by something horrible.
Again, super valid. I think that I woke up that morning, and the best way to explain that video is I hadn't seen my entire body yet. I had no idea what had happened, considering, I was unconscious for most of it. I had no idea what had happened to my full body.
But if it was that severe, wouldn't you already feel pain? Wouldn't you already have bruises?
Yes, it would have been. If she really was assaulted, as she likes to claim, then the bruises would show up very quickly. See, when somebody slaps you or punches you, especially in the face, you feel it almost immediately. The bruises show up very quickly. It doesn't take a long time to show up. That's not how the human body operates. I'm not a biologist. My master's is in psychology. But what she's saying makes no sense. Again, she's trying to come up with some sort of exceptional case, like she's the exception in this scenario. She's not.
On your face? I mean, you say that he punched you in the face, but where are the bruises?
Yeah, so that's something that has not, been publicly released, or he won't talk about. But over and over again in this process, we have handed him pictures that were taken between 20 and 30 minutes right after that video was taken of the bruising starting to develop, of the scratching, and it has been time and time again verified through metadata. It was a matter of being in the correct lighting, the spacing to take the right thing. And another difference is, iPhone camera versus a Snapchat recording and things like.
See, if your explanation is that complicated, you're probably not telling the truth. You know, now look, on the surface, it makes sense what she's saying. Sometimes, depending on the lighting angle or the kind of camera that you're using, what kind of phone you're using, sometimes it can manipulate the image, but not by that much. If you have to resort to that sort of explanation, it's because you don't have a reasonable explanation for why you're making these claims. You're just trying to reach for anything to make money.
So there is solid bulletproof evidence of those bruising marks, scratches, that were provided to their team from day one.
So it was a very brutal attack in which you were very bruised, but we couldn't see the bruises because of the lighting. I want to move on here. So, Trevor.
Sara is a genius, I think, in this interview because she's rephrasing what she's saying and just to just to see how ridiculous she sounds. And she sounds really ridiculous, Lindsay. She does not sound like somebody who's making any sense at all, and rightfully so. I think Sara is very aggressive in this interview. It doesn't seem like a very, let's just say, like a good faith interview, and I don't think it should be because uh, you can't treat people like that fairly. You know, you have to question them.
Mentioned in his clip that you withheld evidence, more evidence, and later posted on Twitter after being asked if your lawyers were aware that you withheld evidence. He said, "It appears her lawyers had the evidence the entire time." Speaking specifically about the video of her laying in bed next to me with no marks on her face the morning after she claims I brutally attacked her, an email containing that video was sent to her attorney before the domestic violence restraining order hearing in 2021, and it was never turned over to us. Perhaps that's why he insisted on adding his name to the released party section in the settlement agreement. There was also a 12-day span of texts between Lindsay and two of her closest friends immediately following the incident that were deleted. We asked for them in discovery for the restraining order hearing, and they were not turned over. Why did your lawyers withhold what seems to be very exculpatory evidence for Trevor?
You know what? That's something my lawyers would have to answer, and that's his issue with them. Like I said, there was an email. I provided absolutely everything I had, and a key fact.
No, no, she didn't because she didn't provide that video. This video came out because it was published by Trevor himself. And now what she's doing is she's rationalizing why she didn't use it. Because she, filed for a restraining order, but it's already too late. She is not making herself look good in this scenario. And let's see what she has to say, though.
That no one does know about is that that video was actually the first thing that I handed over to Pasadena police, and it's on body cam footage. So I did everything to hand over all of that stuff. It was my first time in a legal proceeding, and I did what I was told when I was told to do it.
Yeah, you mentioned that you went to the police. Why wasn't he arrested, do you think? Or, no charges were brought on him. Why do you think that is?
That only the Pasadena Police Department would know that. What I do know is that I handed over my phone and computer because I had nothing to hide, and I interviewed with them. I did everything they told me. We have a 28-minute pre-text call that's recorded that's never been public. That really explains a lot. And what I do know is that Trevor refused to talk to the police, refused to give him their phones. So I'm not really one to speak on that. I just had to let it play out.
Yeah, I mean, if I was accused by a sexual partner who had given consent to have sex with, that I was now being accused of sexual assault, I probably wouldn't talk to the police at that time either.
No, yeah, that makes sense because anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. He's not going to answer questions that don't make any sense. So by giving them the interview, he's in a sense acknowledging he's guilty. And so, rightfully, probably by the advice of his lawyers, they advised him not to speak to the police and to give it some time. And so, yeah, this is a setup. This is entirely a setup by Lindsay.
Why didn't you you turn over the text with you and your closest friends, is this 12-day span? Why didn't you turn those over?
They really focus on that a lot. And like I said, I did everything in my power. I sat up there and I testified and said, I don't have access to this on this backup. Can you please get them from Pasadena police? I would have given everything, like I said, from day one. And so I was really an advocate for getting all those texts because I knew that there was nothing in there that would,
And the police wouldn't release them to you?
I'm not sure. I was the one, like I said, who said in court, please get them from the Pasadena police because I do not have access to them.
But if the Pasadena police can give it to them, they could give it to you as well, no?
I don't know. I mean, I asked my lawyers. I don't know if Trevor's team had done that as well. I just did. I was so overwhelmed at that time, but I was more than willing to cooperate with absolutely everything.
So you said last night in your...
Yeah, so pretty much, again, she's going back to how she feels. I was so overwhelmed that I couldn't make a basic protocol to protect myself because I'm overwhelmed, because I'm abused, because I'm hurt, because I'm young, because I'm impressionable, etc., etc., etc. She's using a lot of these talking points, but she's just adding, a lot more words to cover up her intentions, to make her seem like she has more credibility than she actually does.
You with fellow Blaze TV host Alex Stein that you said fully prepared to take this case to trial, but Trevor says that your attorneys approached him multiple times trying to settle after all of this incriminating evidence for you was released. Is he lying?
I actually have no idea how the settlement came about. Again, that would be, I don't think people really understand that I'm pretty far removed from the process of lawyer versus lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, surely you give your consent as to whether or not you want to settle.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it actually is a really big bummer that this case is not going to trial because all of the evidence that has not been public, including the other accusers and all of those things.
I don't want to talk about the other accusers because I'm here to...
Yeah, no, that's true. She's trying to justify her lack of, proactiveness in the settlement case. So why are you not? Why were your lawyers going for a settlement agreement if, as she says, the overwhelming evidence makes Trevor look guilty? If that was the case, then why would you go for a settlement? That doesn't make any sense. And she's saying she's not aware of it because, I don't understand lawyer talk. You don't have to. You can just Google this and you can ask your lawyer what a settlement is, and they're not going to make a settlement without your consent. Her argument doesn't make any sense. She's always trying to present herself as a victim of Trevor, and now a victim of her lawyers. Let's see who else victimized her.
On you. If they want to talk, I'd love to talk to them, but this is a separate issue here. You agreed to the settlement, but now you're saying it's a bummer it's not going to court. I don't understand how those two things jive.
I think that I really had to take into consideration my mental health as litigations.
There you go. My mental health. So the reason why she couldn't ask basic questions or even answer basic questions that Sara is giving her, it's because of her mental health. This entire thing, I think she is somebody who is not a mentally healthy person in the least. Let's see what she says, though.
And I think the bigger question, and Alex said it last night, if he really wanted, to clear his name or, press charges for fraud, which he did not do with me, he did with the other woman, I think the bigger question is why did Trevor settle? And why doesn't he want to take this all the way? And it's because of the chance of cross-examination and all the evidence for my case.
I mean, I think that's an assumption that you're making, right? I would say maybe Trevor wanted to settle because you're talking about your mental health. Couldn't it be that he was tired of going through it as well, especially if...
Well, yeah, I mean, see, here's the thing, Sara. His mental health doesn't matter. Only Lindsay Hill's mental health matters. Why? Because she's the victim. Okay, he's the bad guy. He doesn't have any mental health concerns. Only she does. So this is a classic textbook narcissist tendency that I wouldn't be surprised actually if Lindsay Hill is a narcissist. She definitely displays a lot of the characteristics based on how she behaves and also just the things that she is engaged in. These are not some things that normal people behave. Narcissistic and people who have psychopathic tendencies just lack an overall sense of empathy for things like that because they just don't. The ends justify the means for them. So this is what she's doing here.
His case is to be made that he's being falsely accused of something he didn't do. You both consented to rough sex. You had a safe word, and you didn't use it. And you don't want your name to be tarnished for all this time, and you just want it to go away. I think that it's terrible that you would say he didn't want to settle because he didn't want all of this to come out when you yourself also settled. I don't think that's a fair statement at all. So my last question, as part of the settlement, you disclosed that you received $300,000 from an insurance company. How did you con an insurance company into paying you any money? And does that money just go to your lawyers or does any of it go to you?
Okay, that was not an objective way of phrasing the question, but given how this entire scenario plays out, can you honestly blame Sara for making that assumption that Lindsay Hill conned the insurance company to give her $300,000? I think her assumption is probably close to 100% correct. So she's making a lot of sense here. Let's see what Lindsay has to say.
Yeah, I wish I could speak more into that, but I am prohibited from talking about that part. So I wish I could go more into detail. But I don't believe.
Wait, hold on. So what happened to super valid question because that's a valid question to me. So why is she not willing to answer it? It's a super valid question, right? I'm grateful that you're asking that question. Now her stance shifted.
Agree with you on the word calm at all. So,
Okay.
sorry, go into that more.
Yeah, I mean, Lindsay, I don't like it when men are falsely accused of doing things and they have their livelihoods taken from them. And it's done by someone who is, speaking out of both sides of their mouth saying, well, I wish that this had.
Just a side note, really quickly. I don't mean to pause this video and interrupt Sara's flow, but I want you guys to pay attention to her behavior, Lindsay's behavior. How many times has she been bobbing her head like this to kind of present herself as somebody who is like understanding, like, yeah, no, definitely, tell me more. It doesn't seem genuine. It's very scripted, and I just don't see Sara doing that. Now, you can argue Sara is being aggressive, she's being too rigid. Uh, I'll grant you that she is, but I don't really notice a hidden agenda on the whole from Sara. She seems very calm on the whole. She's very intense, but on the whole, she's very composed. Like, I don't notice any incongruency between how she's feeling on the inside and the way she's presenting herself externally. Whereas with Lindsay, it's hard to tell because the calm exterior just doesn't really match the interior just based on how she's been behaving so far. Just something that is very interesting that I obviously picked up on.
To court because if it did, boy, let me tell you all the evidence that you could be seeing, but now you can't, and also then settled the case. I don't find that to be credible. I will leave you with this. I want you to learn your lesson on pursuing public figures. And I would ask that you stop sliding into my friend Alex Stein's DMs. Thank you very much, Lindsay.
I really respect you, and that's nice to end that way. I really do respect.
No, I don't think she respects her. I think she is a coward. I think this is just her way of damage control. The fact that she is messaging one of her coworkers, Sara's coworkers, just shows like a very slimy and low class behavior. This is not a person you can trust with anything, actually. This is a person who's just devoid of a conscience, of a moral compass, and she's clearly psychopathic in some ways, because I just don't know any person who is normal who feels comfortable making these accusations and giving out multiple interviews, and just the lack of self-awareness and the addiction to attention that she has is just, I'm really glad Sara exposed her. And you can tell on Sara's face that she has that like slight smirk slash smile of satisfaction, because uh, and if you compare it to the way Lindsay looks, she just looks very uncomfortable. She looks nervous, and so she's softening her tone unnecessarily, exaggerating her smile. It doesn't seem genuine, but it could just be her makeup. It could just be like her face, but somehow I just highly doubt it.
You have to say, and I hope there's a day that you can see the real truth of the situation.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I have so much more to say on that, but we've got to go to a break. I wish I could see the truth in it too. It's just that all the evidence that I'm seeing, has been provided, isn't quite good for Lindsay.
Yeah, no, actually, I don't really buy it either. I think what Lindsay is doing, what she was doing throughout this entire interview, is you can tell she was rehearsing, like on how to answer certain common questions. Lawyers do tend to do this, understandably, because sometimes the media, not just sometimes, a lot of times the media tries to get a cheap gotcha on victims and just people in general. So they coach their clients on how to handle those common questions. And I just don't think Lindsay did a good job, because she's not somebody who knew what she was talking about. And I think a lot of things did take her for a loop, and she was confused, and she would oftentimes resort to very general and broad answers, and that's just a sign of somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, and they're just trying so hard to just damage control. So my overall impression of this interview is, man, I really have to hand it to Sara. She did a good job in exposing Lindsay. Uh, Not that it's difficult to expose her. It's very obvious she exposed herself. But this is a good interview. More people like that need to be exposed in order for others to know that a lot of these cases are fraudulent. And it's very common, actually, for women to come out 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years later with accusations against men in order to make a quick buck. And in a sense, who can blame them, because the system supports them, so it works. And a lot of people have no moral compass, so they're willing to just take advantage of that. But definitely, this was a good interview to watch and analyze. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.